The Mad Max verse, one of the most popular fan favorites of the first sci-fi dystopian movie series that has become a cult classic. But the most interesting aspect is what actually happened to cause this world to collapse. Mostly because the explanation is vague and open to interpretation. Now, we will dissect this series of events that carved out this hellish landscape and brought the Mad Max civilization to its knees. Max Rockatansky, the man of few words that has captivated audience for nearly 20 years. The movie Mad Max Fury Road. When does it happen? Is it a prequel, a sequel, or a reboot? So the other movies in the Mad Max verse is Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. So first, to establish the Mad Max verse timeline, we will use those 4 movies, and also there is a 4-part prequel Fury Road comic book series that I'll be using also. So when do these 4 movies take place? Is it the future? Is it present day? Or is it the past? Well, it's neither. Actually, the Mad Max verse is an alternate reality where World War III happened from the events of the Middle East oil crisis of 1979. So this conflict that blossoms into a war happens over a period of about 10 years and has 3 stages. The first one is the oil wars. The second one is the water wars. And finally, there's the thermonuclear skirmish. But the interesting thing about the Mad Max movies is they don't actually show you anything that has to do with the wars. It shows you what happens with society as these conflicts and wars are raging, and how society as we know it today has completely collapsed at the end of the 10 years war with a thermonuclear skirmish. So the only evidence we get of these wars are excerpts at the beginning of Road Warrior, at the beginning of Fury Road. So let's listen to some clips at the beginning of Fury Road monologue that might give us an idea of the wars and how they unfolded.
My name is Max. My world is fire and blood.
It's the oil, stupid.
Oil wars.
We are killing for gasoline.
The world is actually running out of water.
Now there's the water wars.
So that was excerpt 1.
Once, I was a cop, a road warrior searching for a righteous cause.
The terminal freakout point.
Mankind has gone rogue, terrorizing itself.
Thermonuclear skirmish.
The earth is sour.
Our bones are poisoned.
We have become half-life.
And that was excerpt 2.
The world fell. Each of us in our own way was broken. I am the one who runs from both the living and the dead, hunted by scavengers, haunted by those I could not protect. So I exist in this wasteland. A man reduced to a single instinct: survive.
And that was excerpt 2. So if you're like me, you might be thinking, what the heck does that mean? How does that go into the movies? Well, I had the exact same reaction when I went to see Mad Max Fury Road, because I was under the impression it was a reboot or a prequel. And when I saw it, I really didn't understand it, and I thought it was kind of dumb. But now when I put it into an actual timeline that it makes sense, and I had to read through some comics to actually make the movie make sense, actually Mad Max Fury Road is, I think, the best movie out of the Mad Max movies. But unfortunately, you have to do research to figure it out. So I'm going to lay it out in a chronological timeline for all of you to figure out and rewatch the movies and enjoy them. So this Mad Max movie timeline will be outlining the series of events of the war that takes place behind the movies that no one sees. So we will start at the beginning. In 1979, the Middle East oil crisis begins. In 1980, Saudi Arabia, backed by NATO, and Iran, backed by the Soviet Union's negotiations begin to try to bring the conflict crisis to an end. And in 1981, full-scale war breaks out between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The world experiences massive oil shortages, and by the time of 1982, the entire Middle East is drawn into the war, and 75% of oil production is destroyed. In 1983, Main Force Patrol is formed, and that is NATO countries' federalized police forces. With NATO and Soviet oil production and reserves becoming unsustainable, the war shifts to controlling the world's last functional oil facilities of Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And now we arrive to the first Mad Max movie, which in the Mad Max timeline takes place in 1985, and Max Rostkensky is 23, a star policeman in the Main Force Patrol. Law and order begins to break down, armed gangs ravage the cities, populations begin fleeing to the countrysides, and we can see in the Mad Max movie most of the cities is being abandoned, and people are getting in RVs and trucks or even vehicles and trying to escape what is happening in the cities. At the end of Mad Max, Main Force Patrol is disbanded. Worldwide riots begin raging for resources. NATO and the Soviet Union collapse as working together as combined militaries. In 1986, worldwide martial law is declared in first world nations. The majority of countries' government collapses, and the majority of the rest of the world descends into full-blown anarchy. In 1987, first world nations begin fighting each other over national resources and fresh water supplies, and the water wars begin. Power grids begin failing on the verge of collapse with massive brownouts. In 1988, Israel uses tactical nukes on invading Muslims' armies, and power grids fail worldwide. And now in 1989 is the Road Warrior movie. Max is 27. Warlords control the wasteland and countryside, and they wage war on any remaining government strongholds. The worldwide blackout consumes the planet. Food runs out. People begin feeding on one another. Communication is non-existent. All technology ceases to function. Right at the end of the Road Warrior, the thermonuclear skirmish begins in the northern hemisphere with 10 to 20 ICBM detonations hitting the United States, Europe, Russia, and China. After the nuclear skirmish and the 10 years war of fire and blood, 75 to 80% of the world population perishes. That is roughly 4 billion casualties of the total population of Earth. At this point in the Mad Max verse timeline, it's post-nuclear 1990. And we peeled back the background war that occurs during the first two movies to get a clear understanding of the collapse of what happened with the 10 Years' War. Now let's briefly look at the rest of the timeline we'll be going over for part 2. So the Fury Road prequel comics occur from 1991 to 1994, and Mad Max Fury Road occurs in 1995. And the final movie, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, takes place in 2004. And in the next video, we will be taking a close look of the united gangs of Road Warrior and the feudalistic-like military that spawns up during and before Fury Road, and the dystopian law of the Barter Town, their landscapes, and how they are all connected. Because George Miller was a master of having backstories for all these characters in all these movies. And to clarify the most misinterpreted argument of why Fury Road takes place 4 years after the Road Warrior is the MFP Ford Falcon V8 Interceptor off-road special that Mad Max had destroyed at the end of the Road Warrior, and it appears at the beginning of Fury Road, seeming to be the exact same vehicle, but actually they are completely different cars. In the Road Warrior movie, the compound leader Pappagallo had a modified V8 Ford Falcon chassis and engine as seen here, and Max commandeered this vehicle at the end of the Road Warrior movie. So between Road Warrior and Fury Road, Max scavenged parts from MFP storage garages and under other abandoned facilities and replaced the modified frame with the original Ford Falcon panel parts. So the Ford Falcon V8 Interceptor at the start of Fury Road was actually Max's 3-year baby project that he desperately tries to hold on to his past with. Now if you look closely, you notice the Bondo and the off-colored panels and the shoddy riveting of the V8 Interceptor at the beginning of Fury Road. And that is because of the modifications and Max rebuilding his past through the V8 Interceptor, which personally is one of my favorite movie cars of all times. And the last tidbit of evidence that proves Fury Road comes after the Road Warrior is Mad Max has dog in Road Warrior, and at the beginning of Fury Road he has really long hair and no dog. So case closed. And when I get around to making part 2, I will explain the connections between the warlords of Mad Max Road Warrior, Fury Road, and Thunderdome. And if you're a sci-fi fan, I really recommend you watch these movies and give it a chance. Because what else are you gonna do? Watch Star Trek Discovery STD and keep pulling your hair out? Thanks for watching.